Hello, how's everyone doing? Hopefully, everybody is, I would say, the middle of a great week, but it's only Tuesday. So, the still kind of, I guess, technically the start of the week. But in any event, though, I wanted to talk about acoustic and electric guitars, or really, should you give up one for the other? I've always been personally envious of people like, say, Pierre Bensussen, who just focus in on acoustic guitars and then electric guitars who just focus in on electric guitars, and of course there's the inevitable great session musicians that play both electric and acoustic guitars. And so I kind of wanted to touch on that. So I don't think there's ever been a time where I've ever thought about giving up one for the other. There have been periods in my playing where I've had a lot more acoustics. A couple of years ago, I think I had about like six pretty good high-end acoustics. Martins, Larrivee, Jesus, a couple of other things I had in there, but some really good acoustics. But and I always said to myself, I'm more of a jazz player, and for me, growing up, the irony of it, growing up, I listened to a lot of jazz, and that really got me interested in guitar playing per se. It was Wes Montgomery, it was Grant Green, it was Tal Farlow, all of the legends. Let's put it that way. And for the most part, other than Kenny Burrell, I didn't really see jazz guys playing acoustic guitars, nylon or steel string. But Kenny Burrell, and it was actually later on, I saw him playing a couple of Martin-looking things and OM stuff. But so one would think that I would just focusing on arch tops. But growing up, I couldn't afford an electric guitar and an amp and all that other stuff. I grew up playing acoustic guitars, and I'm glad and very, 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 very fortunate that I did that, because I think the beauty of playing an acoustic guitar um, and the hard work that you put in pays off in the long run. I think it's actually far easier to go from acoustic guitar and develop really good technique, and then transfer that to electric than the other way around. That's just personally speaking, because the guitar in and of itself is the amplifier, so your fingers have to do a lot of work to get the tone, the richness, and the color from that perspective. So there's a lot to be learned, and if you learn to manipulate your fingers that way, when you go to electric guitar, it's going to be far easier. Now, let's talk about why people would focus in on one versus the other. I guess the obvious thing is that they like it more. So I belong to the Acoustic Guitar Forum, and I go up on there, and you look at the signatures on the folks there, and they're all acoustic guitars. They got Martins, Bourgeois, Froggy Bottoms, and Yamahas, and things like that. And so that seems to be what they relegate themselves to, is basically it's an acoustic guitar. And by the way, sometimes I think playing acoustic guitar is like playing another instrument versus playing electric guitar. Let's just put it that way. And so you get better by focusing on one versus the other. You actually do. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like the technique is, other than plucking the strings, they're transferable back and forth. But playing an acoustic guitar, whether it be classical guitar, whether it be a steel string, is very, very, very different than playing a Telecaster, than playing an arch top, than playing a Les Paul. It's just very different. Because when you play an electric guitar, there are a couple of things you got to worry about. One is the guitar, and then two is the amplifier, and three might be effects if you're gonna do some processing. So it just increases the number of things that you have to work well with. What I found out from playing electric guitar is that certain guitars respond better based upon the amp that I'm using. So I have right now basically two amps, Milkman and then the Hendrickson Bud. So my Gibson ES-175D is a very, very dark guitar, and it sits better on the Milkman. That tube amp effect gets the clarity a little bit more about that. Some guitars, if they're bright, will sit a little bit better on the Hendrickson Bud, because that's voiced a little bit darker. So really, you have to learn how to work your amp, and you have to learn how to work your guitar. So that doesn't mean that it's because it's harder, it's more difficult, you should stay away from electric guitar or anything like that. It just means that it's very different. Acoustics, on the other hand, you do also have to worry about electronics if you're playing live and you want to amplify what you're playing. But acoustics, once you learn to work that acoustic, it's I find that I have to minimize the level of acoustics that I have because you get better at playing any guitar, but more so to me, acoustics than electric. You really have to know the acoustic guitar. I'm quick sometimes to change guitars, but if it's an electric guitar, there are a lot more things you can do to shape the sound to get it to sound the way you want to hear it. So, amplification, effects, all of that stuff. With an acoustic guitar, especially if you're not going to amplify, you're going to mic it, you're basically kind of stuck with the tonality of that guitar. Okay, if you want a bright guitar, get a bright guitar. You can't really do that much to change it. Okay, you can change your picks, you can put different strings on, but at the end of the day, the wood is the wood, and that's the amplification. So there's not as much latitude. So anyway, getting back to that, acoustic versus electric, and should you even focus on one versus the other? I am a proponent that you need to do both. Okay, unless you're Pierre Bensusan, unless you're some Christopher Parkning or some great classical guitarist, and unless that's just basically on a personal level, that's what you like. Believe it or not, there have been guitar players that I've played with and I've spoken with that were really great, electric players, and I give them an acoustic, and they didn't sound all that good. But a really, really good guitarist will sound good on electric and acoustic guitar and stuff. So, I think the benefit of playing both acoustic and electric is that, yeah, a lot of skill sets, despite differences, are very, very similar. I always viewed acoustic guitar as like lifting weights for my electrics. I had to work a little bit more or a lot more to get tones out of the acoustic guitars. Yeah, and electric guitars, you can set them up various ways to get that. So, but really, if you put a gun to my head and I had to choose between the two, electric or acoustic guitar, ah, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's kind of might shock most people, but I probably would take the acoustic because that's what I started with. Okay, there were several years I had nothing except an acoustic guitar. A good acoustic guitar can become, you could be on a stranded island and you can play that. You don't need anything else and stuff. So, and a lot of times, even when I practice my jazz stuff, it'll be the arch tops, and I won't plug it in. And if it's and it doesn't have to, it could be a laminate arch top, it could be the solid top and stuff like that. So I think that to me gets at the essence of music, is the acoustic nature of it. And I love me some West. I love Grant Green. I love Tal Far. I love all those guys and everybody I mentioned. That for our, although Pat Martino did play a lot of acoustics, John McLaughlin played a lot of acoustics and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, if I had to actually choose one, I'd probably choose a really good acoustic and ride it out with that one. All right then. Let me know in the comments and things of that nature which ones you might choose if you were put with that dilemma. As usual, regardless of whether it's an acoustic or an electric, get a setup and do what? Practice, practice, and practice some more.